to welcome you and extend our deepest thank you to you guys for making it here. I think it's going to be a great event, and I'm going to hand it over to Sean Kershaw, Director of the Citizens League of Minnesota.
Thank you. And I want to acknowledge that Valentine did, I think, 99% of the work on campus here to make this happen. So, and we paid big money between the current and the Citizens League to produce the poster that we paid nothing for in Valentine's case. So that's fantastic. Most of you have heard me more times than you want this week, but the Citizens League is a nonpartisan public policy group in the Twin Cities. We've been thrilled to partner with 89.3 The Current for the past 5 years on policy in a Pint in the Twin Cities. So this is our first foray into another place. We're thrilled that there are human bodies in the room, so to begin with. But this has always been a fun conversation. We're glad to begin this elsewhere. And I will say that part of the fun of this series has been the moderator for the program. That Steve Seal is someone who's passionate about public policy, talks about it in English, and has always made these events interactive and fun for people. So I will turn it over to Steve to take it from here. But thanks on behalf of the Citizens League. We're pleased to partner with the McCarthy Center this week, so thanks.
Thank you. Welcome. So nice to see everyone out here tonight. And indeed, as Sean said, I'm Steve Seal, co-host of the morning show, 6 to 10 a.m. on The Current. Very pleased to be emceeing the first half of tonight's special Current road trip. Later on, your favorite bald broadcasting Brit back there. Mark Wheats is back there to spin tunes and introduce tonight's special musical guest as well. Mark's back there. He's been playing the tunes up until now. Hello, Mark. Wave. There he is, Mark Wheat, back there in the DJ booth. So he'll be introducing tonight's special musical guest, Chris Koza, later on this evening. So after Policy in a Pint, Mark will be spinning from 7 to 8, and Chris Koza will be performing from 8 to 9. Then Mark will be back DJing again, starting at 9, all the way till 11. Policy in a Pint is, as Sean said, it's a co-production of 89.3 The Current and of the Citizens League, a nonprofit organization that works to build a more engaged citizenry on issues that affect all of us. And tonight's program is also co-presented by the Eugene J. McCarthy Center for Public Policy, Civic Engagement, and thanks to our season sponsor, Best Buy, as well, all season long for Policy in a Pint. We've been doing this for a long time, and since it's part of our mission to do more than just be a hub for great music and arts culture, the Current that is, but be a broader force for community engagement in the Twin Cities and beyond, and so the emphasis on the beyond tonight here, clearly. To hang with the St. Cloud and Collegeville posse, as Mark says. He nodded because he knew I was going to say that, the posse. So for the mind and the soul tonight, the music and the intellect. The Apollonian and Dionysian cover both tonight. So, such as it is. So we hear more and more about this idea, keeping it local, every day. Across the country, there's farmers markets and CSAs, community-supported agriculture, community gardens sprouting up in just about every community. Local, privately run farms are coming back, and it's something that hasn't seen the light of day since my grandfather's time. My grandfather had a farm. Probably, sold his food to a local distributor. Food showed up down the road. Of course, today we know about agribusiness. How did things change like that? I'm going to see if either of our guests tonight can tell that story in under 60 seconds. I don't have a reward. I was going to give like a homegrown hothouse tomato to one of the two of you if you could come up with that. But anyway, a round of applause if you possibly can. Gary Braver, first of all, is owner of Plowshare Farm in Parker's Prairie, named Edible Twin Cities 2009 Local Hero Winner for Best Farm. Please welcome Mr. Gary Braver. And Diane Veal-Jones here, an environmental studies professor who specializes in food culture and agriculture at the College of St. Benedict and St. John's University. And please welcome Diane Veal-Jones. Before we get to that question, I actually have a few first. Gary, how did you become a farmer? Because I understand that you weren't a farmer by trade or growing up in Long Beach. You chose this within this past decade, is that right? When was it? Mic's on, right?
Mic's on?
Is the mic's on?
Hello. Hello. Can you guys hear me? Okay, wonderful. I grew up in Alexandria, just north of here, on the lake, and you know, for many kids, coming out of the rural areas, you know, really farming wasn't on my radar screen at all. You got it? Okay. You guys can all hear me though, yes? Really, I mean, my image of the farmer was kind of this Lake Wobegon, Norwegian bachelor farmer, you know, and that grew row crops and stuff. So growing up, that wasn't, you know, really on my radar screen. I'm actually a Johnny. I went to St. John's, and I graduated in '97 with a degree in psychology. And it was when I went after I left St. John's, I went out west and saw people involved with this movement called CSA, and working on small farms and actually making a living off of farming. And that's really what piqued my interest and got me going.
Cool. Oh, that's rough. Let's see what I can do about that. Hello. I don't know what to do. So I hold it like this. I want to start off by reviewing how things used to be and how we got here, like I said, and you know, why it would be a good idea to do things very differently than we do. I mean, we have this general idea, you know, big corporation bad, small business good, but there are real reasons behind that if we can sum them up. Like I said, who wants to take on this idea of, does anybody have a way of summarizing the story of how we got to the small farmer and the giant agribusiness and why? Why do things happen that way?
For very clear reasons. We had a Secretary of Agriculture, Bud, who said we have all of this land that's not producing, and we will pay farmers to produce. And so land was put into production for all kinds of grain crops, led to bigger farms and agribusiness and lots of profits, and we produced more food than we needed, so we had to find places to put it, but the small farmers couldn't compete. Absolutely couldn't compete. So we did it for profit.
Is there any way that it's a good thing that we did this? I mean, we think of it as being, there's so many reasons, and if you know anything, if you've read any Michael Pollan at all, which do most people here know who that is, yes, right, the On the Words Dilemma and Lots of Food and those books like that. So much of what we're going to talk about here tonight touches on the stuff that he writes about. But you read this kind of stuff and you think, there's no possible good outcome from the giant sizing of agriculture here in America. Is that in fact the case, or is there any positive attribute to the way things have been evolved into being?
Yes, I mean, I think one of the questions that everybody asks is can organic or local farming feed the world? And there's lots of data that says, well, yes, it can. And then other data that says if we don't produce large quantities of food, we're not going to be successful. If we look at most of the world, they're already engaged in organic farming. Small-scale farmers, because they don't have a choice. They don't have any money for the inputs, for chemicals, and they lack water, so they're not producing a lot of food. I would say if we look most countries, we probably would stop dumping our food into those countries. Small farmers can produce food, feed their own people. The area that I am not convinced that is going to be successful is sub-Saharan Africa. And if we don't look at agribusiness for large-scale farming, I'm not sure that we can feed sub-Saharan Africa.
Which one of you guys was saying you just went to the
I
thing?
did.
What was it?
I went to a Fulbright conference on sustainability in San Francisco just about 2 weeks ago, and one of the sponsors was Monsanto, which
Which is mind-boggling.
which was it was very difficult for many of us there. And in fact, when the woman stood up to do her spiel, a lot of people got up and walked out. I chose not to because I wanted to give, in fairness, at least to hear what she had to say. Monsanto was putting together a very slick little booklet, very well done. And what they're saying is how they really are focusing on sustainability, that they can feed the world and they can do it in a sustainable manner. So they don't say anything against organic or locally grown. They just say we're doing what we should be doing to protect the environment.
I do agree that, since the 1960s, there's been what's called the Green Revolution. And those people that, founded the Green Revolution, which wasn't really a green revolution, it was a dependence upon petrochemicals in order to grow the food for the world for the last, 40 years. Those people really came at this with altruistic reasons. And we cannot demonize them. But we can say, is this model working? In particular, because this model has increased yields, yields in corn, yields in wheat. However, at what cost? And the costs are really important because this kind of agriculture is based solely on one thing, and that is, everyone, oil.
Yeah, and so in what way? Make it clear for us, for those who don't know. Oil
drives the tractors, oil produces oil. Actually, there's a statistic that says there's 1 calorie of oil that goes to produce 1 calorie of food. What that means, and it takes 10 calories of oil to produce 1 calorie of processed food, which equated, that means that in a box of cereal, there's over a half a gallon of gasoline. And that's the tractor use, that's the transportation, that's the fertilizer use. So our whole food system is dependent upon that one thing of oil, which is not a renewable resource.
Right. So there are there's just tons of ills that it seems that are attributable back to. Oh, I could use this. Maybe I'll just talk loud. Yeah, okay, we'll just do that.
Middle mic?
You're loud.
I'm loud.
You're loud. We're getting another handheld.
Is my voice loud or is the microphone loud? The mic is fine. My voice is
Hello, check. Hello. I'm the whole one. And now we'll see if that's off now. And now we're going to see if Diane sets us off.
No, I won't.
All right. So as I was saying, so the oil problem is a main problem. We also look at the way that the American diet and food production and everything has created all these other ills as well. So let's list some of these as well. I'll start. There's corn and soy products is like the basis of everything, right? And that then in turn creates dietary problems. But again, to revisit sort of 101, why is it all about corn and soy in America? Why is that? Why is that what we produce? And the basis of all agriculture, it seems. Or do I have that right?
Yeah. I'm also a dietitian, so I really care about what it means for. She needs the mic.
She needs mic now.
The mic.
Yeah, just do that. Well, let's just pass this off. Okay. Yeah.
I thought I still had the mic. I have the mic now. If we look at why corn and soy is, if we look at those two grains, when we feed animals, and Americans want plenty of protein and they want it from meat sources, we can make them grow faster and larger with that kind of diet. So we are looking at feeding livestock.
Wow.
It's this one.
Yeah. Why don't we just go mindless?
I can put on my in the classroom voice.
Put on the inner class. I think we can all do that.
Yeah, I think we all have some pretty good voices.
Only the mics. Only the handheld.
She just had the hand. That's what she was using. She just had it.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right.
All right, let's just do that.
Am I in the classroom voice? So the advantage in terms of a producer is that you get larger profit because you produce your animals faster and we feed them on those products. All right, so it makes sense to grow more corn and soy. Has all kinds of repercussions in terms of increased food prices in the rest of the world and diet.
Right.
On the farming end, though, the reason why there's so much emphasis on corn is because it stores well, and it's a commodity. So in any commodities, we can dump that in other countries. We can transport it well. We can store it well, comparatively to vegetables. I mean, the one thing that I don't know if we'll have time to really talk about it in this forum is how the government actually supports by the subsidy systems, namely these 4 crops of corn, soybeans, wheat, and rice. And the reason that stems from is actually back in the 40s and before, when they were supporting farmers, not necessarily large farmers, but small farmers too, in helping them get a good price in years that they had a bad yield because of weather, because of pests, those things. And it really, originally was a good idea to help balance that out and help support that. What has happened since Earl Butz in the 1970s is really, they opened up the doors and they said, the government will buy an unlimited supply of your corn, and you will get this price per bushel of corn no matter what. So there's no incentive not to grow these crops because everything is geared for a farmer to grow, to get this, whether it be the insurance, the subsidies. If they have a bad yield, they will get assistance. If I have a bad yield, I'm screwed.
Yeah.
I have rotten tomatoes in the field.
So another problem with this is that we have a society that somebody just needs to understand what it puts in its mouth, basically, right?
People don't know what they eat, but I really think that we're very removed from our food choices. My students out here, they all talk, if they had the money, they would eat differently. But the reality is they eat the way they think they can afford to eat.
Okay, well let's get at that actually, because that's really interesting to me. That strikes at the heart of what seems to be a really look, we have microphones.
Right. The plan. Edwin's logs are coming off.
These are broken, so.
Sound checks, guys.
And everybody plug their ears for the first 30 seconds. First 30 seconds.
Oh gosh.
And then everyone will be able to hear. And you won't have to yell. All right.
What?
Trade.
All right.
Test.
If they talk, is it okay? Is it clear? It should be.
Clear. Testing.
Testing 1, 2. I have it up here.
All right.
Okay. Now they have their mics very far away from their mouths, so you might want to trim their
Near your
mouths a
mouth
little
and
bit.
talk again.
What's that?
Hello. Where were you born?
Heather's right about here. Try again.
Just say it.
Hello, anything?
Okay.
Test.
Beautiful.
Right on. Yay! All right.
Johnny Blend.
What is it then?
Johnny Blend.
Johnny Ben.
Blend.
Oh, Johnny Blend. I get a lot of Johnny Ben at this point after that. All right, where were we? We were talking about the disconnect between eating healthily and thinking that you can afford to eat healthy. So that's basically you're saying that students say to you things like, I would do this if I could, but it's either too expensive or more complicated, and I have to eat and I have to study.
Well,
Yeah.
convenience is I don't know anyone who doesn't use some convenience food. I mean, if you really look at your own diet, I cook my own food, but I don't make my own tomato paste, although I make my own tomato sauce. I make my own bread, but I don't make my own flour. So, I mean, no matter how we look at it, some part of our life is based on somebody else processing the food we consume.
And here we are in this cycle where we have, I mean, everybody understands this, right? We have this cycle where we have these extremely busy lives, and so we eat this crap food, and nobody knows how to cook anymore, and all this, and thus we're eating things from grocery stores that truck it in California or God knows where, South America, and it's cheap, right?
Right.
Oddly enough, cheaper to do it that way to get whatever food from California than it is to get it up the street. So how in the world are we going to get out of this cycle, especially when there are these multinational corporations involved that have billion-dollar ad budgets and lobbyists, and we're so entrenched in this situation that we're in, this cycle.
We do it as we're doing right now, grassroots.
Yeah.
Well, and we have to ask ourselves, I mean, sure, a ho-ho, 360 calorie ho-ho costs, I don't even know what, 50 cents. For those same 360 calories, of good quality calories, like a salmon, those 360 calories, you'd pay $5. And so, in part, we have to take a look at, what is the end game here? What about the issues of quality and quality of what we're putting into our bodies, and also just quality of life. And so, there's more to life than just commodities and quantity. We need to see value in other things in life.
And I think that most of the people in here would agree with you, but what I'm wondering is how do we bring the community and everyone that lives around us in greater Minnesota and in America into this conversation. We're having this conversation on a college campus, with essentially upper middle class people here that are very happy to be thinking about this and at some point start implementing it if they can. But I was just talking to somebody today or yesterday about the idea that isn't it ironic that it might actually be harder to get this new system of living, be it through community agriculture or whatnot, implemented in more rural areas than it would be in the Twin Cities, because that's the kind of way that people think and they talk, and there's this sort of integrated communication and whatnot. How are we going to get this going?
Well, if we look at farmers markets and St. Cloud area, St. Joe in particular, has a fantastic farmers market. Farmers market has events every single week in the summer. They have a big harvest festival, brings out lots and lots of people. They have music and they have children's activities. And for most people in St. Joe, you can walk to the farmers market, which is one of the things that can make farmers markets or community-supported agriculture potentially elitist, is that if you don't have transportation, you cannot get there. And I think that's one of the limitations is if you don't have access, it doesn't matter if we talk about that it's fresher and it tastes better, that's immaterial. And it's also immaterial if you really think you can't afford it. So one of the things that I see is really positive is the WIC program, the Women, Infants, and Children Supplemental Food Program, now allows food from farmers markets. So we're making a realization that people who are low income still should have access to fresh food.
Some of those processed foods aren't cheap though either. I mean, a thing of Doritos, which, you know, that's not going to sustain you, you know, for any activity of sustaining your brains. I mean, that bag of Doritos is you know, what, $4? You know, at the same token, you could go to your farmer's market and buy, you know, a couple pounds of potatoes and or carrots or and that kind of stuff. As long as it's from the raw and it's from scratch.
But I've got to do something with that potato.
You got to do something.
That's the thing. I can't.
Well, and
just
that's the
work
thing.
it.
You cannot be alienated, and I'm going to touch you now. Because we can't be alienated.
Okay.
You can't be alienated
Touch me again.
from your farm. And it can't be, you know, and that's what we're trying to do. I mean, that's what we're talking about. It's not being alienated from where you're getting your food, not being alienated from the land, not being alienated from one another.
Okay,
That's what we need to do.
but one of the things we're going to have to do then is we're going to have to teach people to cook.
Exactly.
I mean, we need to go back there because it's one thing to say all of these foods exist in your farmer's market or your CSA, but if you don't know what to do with them. And one of my, not favorite memories, but realization of how far removed we are from food is a student who held up this substance in front of me and he said, "What is that?" And I said, "It's an onion." And he says, "Oh no, they come in a little jar, they're white flakes." And so if that's,
Was this a college student who said this?
yes. But I, if we really think about lots of ways that we get our food, it is not as a home food. And if you've never seen an onion,
Exactly.
you don't know what to do with it.
I was reading something else recently that was somebody, some child aware of what a French fry was, but had no idea, what its original form was. It's a potato. It's a French fry.
Well, I'll add my own story. My kids, I have 4 kids, and there was a cartoon that came out, a couple years ago. I don't know, it's called Animal Farm or something like that. And all the bulls were walking around, and they had udders. And udders, guys, udders. Udders don't grow on bulls. And of course, my kids spotted it right away. Why is that, Dad? Why does he have that hanging out? But it does, and there's a element of where we could, start is, start them young. Start them young in community gardens, and school gardens, that kind of thing.
And I do think that probably is the key. There are a lot of exciting schoolyard gardens. There's one that's planned for Kennedy Elementary in St. Joseph for the summer. Boys and Girls Clubs that will grow their own food in the garden and then hope to sell it at the St. Joe Farmers Market. So you start making that connect. The other thing I think is we really have to find a way to give a nutrition message that is not boring. Everything we talk about why we should not eat the Doritos really isn't a message that anybody cares about, because look at what we're eating out here. All right? It's exactly.
Right, well, it's a soul of the message, really. It's we need to turn it upside down somehow. Yeah. Let's really quick. I just want to talk about organic because we've talked about the local food and local farms and all this sort of stuff, but we've had this word organic in our supermarkets for years and years now, and I know generally what it means. I think most people in here generally know what it means, but are there really laws, first of all, that determine what is organic and what can't be labeled organic, and why do I still need to shop local, and why is that better than just going down to Cub and buying something that's labeled organic?
Yeah, we are certified organic, our farm is, and that's a choice that we made because we sell to some of the co-ops in the cities and St. Cloud area. And what that means for us as a farm is, number one, we have to pay for that. And number two, we're inspected yearly. an inspector comes through our fields and shows that the paperwork that we do, which is the paperwork is much like the paperwork I would have to do for taxes, except for my organic farming, and just to make sure that I'm not using any synthetic pesticides, any synthetic fertilizers, and that not only that, but that I'm maintaining practices like using cover crop systems and looking for pieces of plots of erosion in our land and trying to mitigate that. So the organic standards really is a baseline that we could start with. However, that being said, I mean there is for me in my life and my family's life, when we go to shop, there's kind of good, better, and best. I mean, for me personally, local and organic is what I want, because I want to be supporting that farm. I want to be making sure that our family isn't eating pesticides. I want to be supporting the environment. So that's good. Below that, if I would have a choice between buying a broccoli from one of my neighbors at the local farmers market, or buying it from something from Earthbound Farm that's going to be grown in California, even though my neighbor farm, he might not be certified organic, I would choose that. I would get to know my neighbor, my friend farmer, and on his garden. So for me, that's a choice that I would make, it's for me also these labels and go beyond just saying organic or not organic. For me, there's another level of saying I would like to classify things as sustainable, which means sustainable for our communities, sustainable for the workers that are working on the farms, working in a meat packing plant doing 400 or 500 cuts an hour is not sustainable. That's industrial. Working in the fields of Earthbound Farms, where these farm workers are paid, our conditions are basically slave conditions of the new millennium, and they do the same operation over and over and over again. I mean, there's one example is one migrant farmer. He was saying he was working in the fields for 4 years, cutting lettuce. Just that one job, and he's starting to get good at it. And I know I have some of my interns here from our farm who worked here at our farm, and we it's hard work, but we do a variety of work, and it's pretty fun, and
They're going, sure, here it is.
Just don't give them the mic yet.
This will be the last one that I ask, and I'm going to go out and start to get your questions here. Just be thinking of them. Usually what happens in these get policy defined is that they also bunch up towards the end. So have no fear, raise your hand and have some questions. And the only rules about this is that I hold the mic. You don't get to take it from me. And no speeches. So just questions. So here's a real Pandora's box question. Why do we have to use pesticides?
Well, are you saying why do we have to use
Is there
any pesticide?
Not-
Because even if you're looking at organic farming, you're using pesticides. You're just not chemical pesticides.
Okay. What I mean to say is what is the connection between, if I understand this correctly, what is the connection between pesticides, having used so many pesticides, and this sort of monoculture? Explain that term, because I'm not going to be as good at explaining as you are.
Yeah, on our operation, we grow over 40 varieties of crops. And there are some years that, number one, as far as pesticides go in our philosophy on our farm, we try to keep the soil healthy, and in turn keep the crops healthy. And many of those pests are just a symptom of something underlying going on, some kind of stress on those plants. whether it be nutrient deficiency, compaction, lack of water, and it's amazing. I mean, it's amazing. You can have a bed of broccoli, for instance, and those up on the top of the row where there's more compaction or it might be sandier soil, those are the ones that are going to be getting the pest pressure. Whereas the other ones that are treated healthy, they stay healthy and they resist pests. But there are some pests that are out there, like say potato beetles, that we deal with every year, or cucumber beetles. In a year that cucumber beetles, kill all of our cucumbers. Like, that's happened in the past. For our farm, because we grow over 40 varieties of crops, maybe it's bad year for cucumbers, but maybe it's a fantastic year for those potatoes, or it's a fantastic year for that broccoli. So diversity is a real key factor in that. And if I was just growing cucumbers and I wasn't organic and that's all I was growing, and cucumber beetles were devastating my crops, I might do what I needed to do in order to save my livelihood. So that's where diversity is really a key on all farms.
Did you want to follow up on that?
I'm thinking of my own garden, so if I really would put poor quality soil at the end of my rows and the pests would attack it, since I only do organic gardening, that would be really nice if they would be selective. So I never thought about trying to do it in a negative way of controlling my pests. But thank you.
Good tip.
To do compacted soil at the end of my row.
It's not intentional.
No, but I'm thinking if it's...
And then they could trap them, and then you could go get them.
That's right. It's a really good idea.
My first question here.
Well, my question kind of goes back to the diet aspect of cultural foods. And what really puts this issue into light for me is looking at what we've lived on before the advent of agriculture, that being plants and meats from natural sources. And you look at what we're eating now, and now we see, heart disease is now a leading cause of death. Inflammation, diabetes, it's just crazy how unhealthy people are because of how we're pushing these unhealthy foods, like simple grains and sugars, towards our people. So my question for you is, what do you think we should do? How are we going to push a message of natural, organic foods towards people who have listened to the government push the food pyramid that has grains at the bottom towards us for so many years?
And I would add, especially when, really mealy wheat bread with all kinds of sophisticated grain and whatnot is just so yucky as far as, I would think, your typical Wonder Bread eating child is concerned. Gary is, of course, going, no, my kids don't think that at all. I'm thinking of the kids who are on it already and how we get them to change.
Yeah. I would say that one of the things that works best is to really introduce to children something new and they would discover that it tastes good. So Wilmer School District has a farm to school program. What they do is they introduce a food the day before, so it might be locally grown broccoli, and they try that food and then it shows up on the menu the next day. And then for the newsletter that goes home to the family, there's information about broccoli, the farmer, and some recipes for cooking and using broccoli. So part of it is this idea that you introduce the new food, you do this early, and you make it then something that tastes good. It takes time if we're all, the reason we eat all this food is it does taste good. We like the sweet, we like the salt. What we need to do is change our taste buds.
Question?
We often talk and seem to focus on the waistline issue of all this processed food in our diets, but I'm wondering if you can expand a bit upon what effect that has for our brain health and our developmental health.
I can't scientifically make a clear connection between eating junk food and saying it has anything to do with brain development. We do, however, know that it makes a difference on how we nourish ourselves and how well we learn. And I think that connection is much clearer. So part of it is not feeding enough of the right foods really interferes with your ability to be alert and learn. Which is why we have programs like Head Start where food is included. It's why we have a school lunch program, is that we focus on that. But I don't see any direct way of saying it's destroying our brain cells.
Well, we could look at the evolutionary path of some other animals of this planet, including things like other omnivores out there that started out as being omnivores, but then got stuck in a rut of eating just bamboo, bamboo, bamboo. And now things like the panda, which has a huge head, which used to house a huge brain, now just has a pretty tiny brain. And so, we've only been in this process. Humans have only been in this evolutionary process of eating this way for the last, 40, 50 years. I don't really want to do an experiment on this, our society, what it will take for our brains to shrink that small.
There are plenty of other things helping to shrink that actually. On television. So, before our next question here, I want to ask, coming back to the local angle, we've acknowledged all these things that are, all these reasons that getting our food locally is important. But what that means is, if we commit to that, does that mean I have to give up my bananas, my pineapple, in the wintertime? Does that mean I have to give up everything in the wintertime and eat rutabagas? How does one put a rutabaga anyway?
Our farm is actually pretty unique. We're probably one of the only CSAs in the country, and we don't grow bananas, sorry. But we're one of the only CSAs in the country. Because Minnesota, our growing season is pretty small. And so what do you do in the middle of February? Well, just today, we did a delivery and our delivery share was filled with red peppers, broccoli, sweet corn, tomatoes, a lot. I could keep on going on. And what we do is we blanch and freeze them. And it's something that, civilizations have been doing for eons, is setting food away for the winter. And the taste of these, I would bet that my red peppers can beat anything that you could find at the store this time of year.
That still doesn't answer what do you do about pineapples and bananas, right? Yes. What I'm looking for is if I'm going to buy, are they fair trade? So really focusing on where there are foods that we eat that are not going to come from the United States. I also think that if we're looking at small farmers, particularly farmers that are trying to be organic farmers in low-income countries, that unless Americans support and buy those items, those people are not going to be in business, and they can't be successful as a small farmer. So I don't want to say no foods, don't purchase any foods that come from long distances, because some of those foods are helping to support small farmers in other countries. So for bananas, I'm looking for fair trade. We have obviously fair trade coffee, we have coffee here, we have tea, we have chocolate. There's movements to trying to make other of the foods that we eat fair trade.
My question was, back topic, what kind of pesticides can you use on American farms?
There's a lot of biological pesticides that we can use. Some of these come from their plant derivative, like from the chrysanthemum plant. There's pyrethium that we can use. There's some ETs that we can use, which is like it's a bacteria. It's kind of like a yogurt that the bugs eat, the potato beetles eat, and then they die, which is relatively safe for beneficial insects. So there are organic sprays.
Gary, can't you also use human labor to just pick the bugs up?
Yeah, we do have a crew of slaves that we put to work every year.
Yes.
Now I know why you have that reputation that you have, actually.
You talked earlier about cost and how maybe buying organic and fair trade can be kind of seen as something that isn't available to all people. But when I was thinking of our student population, it seems to me that cost might not be the main factor, but more an issue of priorities. Because I would argue that most people on this campus can afford to do like fair trade organic and local, but we're spending, like when we look at what we're spending our money on, we're cutting costs in food, which is the only thing that really things for our body. When you look at a car, clothes, and all, those are something. So I think it's cost more, because cost, I mean, maybe for small people, but priorities.
You are right. I mean, I always get frustrated when I did farmers market and the person would drive up with a Cadillac and go, $2 for potatoes? Oh my God! Yeah, and it's like, well, you're just driving up with in a Cadillac, and you're griping about the $2 potatoes. So it is. You are right on the number as far as priorities because we as part of our CSA. And in fact, I mean, a CSA in particular can be actually a good deal for our members. They get a lot of food for the price that they pay for joining a CSA. A little plug there.
and Gary, I will give you a plug, but don't they have to give the money up front for the membership?
For a CSA?
Yes.
Yeah, they do have to save up their money, or they can put it on their credit card.
But it's another one of those points that I want to make is that you have to have some pocket of money to draw from to do the right thing, like join a CSA.
And here's something that Michael Pollan, I heard him talking at this one table. He said, the food movement has been a wonderful thing for small farmers like me. It's really advanced this issue to the forefront of the mainstream. But that's not where it ends. It can't fall on just the food movement's shoulders. There is some really some big issues that I can't solve, nor can the customers solve on their own. And that's where things like government subsidies, not for the farmer, but for low-income folks, so that they can afford, good local organic food, does play a big part.
Steve, there are two people back here that have been trying to ask questions.
Okay, I got one guy right here, and right back to you.
Lately I've noticed more and more big companies are getting on the kind of organic, low, or kind of environmentally healthy bandwagon, especially I've noticed Starbucks, and I've made an effort to purchase fair trade coffee, but you notice more of these big companies like Walmart are getting on the green bandwagon. Do you see that this as a good thing, or do you see it as just greenwashing and we really won't be able to be truly sustainable until we get just pure local, more just small businesses, small farmers getting into this market?
How many of you have seen Foodie? Okay, quite a few of you. If you haven't, it's worth watching, but one of the questions that comes up in the film is because Walmart is going into the organic food business, is whether that was a good thing or a bad thing. And the comment from the organic food growers was it's a positive thing, because just think of the impact that all of those food purchases have on the reduction of our use of chemicals that are polluting our water and our land. So it's another way of thinking about it. The flip side that I'm concerned about is it going to drive out the small organic farm?
Well, and what they're purchasing is not from small operations, and there's where I get back to, you could have an industrial farm that's organic, but there's more at stake here than just whether a farm is using pesticides in petrochemicals or not. There is also the issue of labor and how their workers are treated, and so all those factors can be calculated into that equation in the choices that we make. And that's, you know what? That's the wonderful thing about this movement, is because, you go to the elections, every 4 years to vote? You have 3 choices every single day to make a choice.
More than 3, like.
Yeah. And so you can choose to support, that grower that, as I'm climbing down to Trevor, you can support that farmer that espouses your values.
Next question.
I wanted to go back to the topic of crops that have to be imported. And I was just wondering what the ethics are of buying cash crops from countries where maybe there are a lot of people that are struggling just to feed themselves. Is it good to be sending the cash over there, or is that also causing other problems like driving up the price of land because it's being used to grow cash crops, and that way setting Americans in competition with people there who are maybe some more subsistence farmers?
I would argue that our policies of exporting our food to low-income countries is actually causing the farmers to have to go into cash crop business because they are not making any money on the food that they're growing for consumption in the country. They cannot keep up with the prices of the stuff that they find in the market sent from the United States. So I see it as a vicious cycle of why not go into growing cotton if you can make a profit on it. And then unfortunately, there are all kinds of gender issues because the woman still grows the food for the family and the man grows the cash crops. And we got all kinds of issues in terms of family dynamics and community dynamics.
I think it's a good question to ask because that family isn't going to feed their whole family off of just bananas. And the truth of the matter is that most of the world of today are subsistence farmers. They still are farming, and I don't want to take away that power that those families have to feed themselves. Not just grains or bananas, but the small gardens, the eggs, taking the eggs, the meat, the goat that these small farmers could actually have on their small operations. I don't want to force them out.
My question is regarding the policy. You talked a little bit about the subsidy issue. And my question is regards to what's the better way to go? Do we unsubsidize our current agricultural system, or do we subsidize this more local system? And that, because there's a huge long line of subsidies from the oil that's used to crops.
Then I'll join in.
Okay. One of the things is we have to be sensitive with these subsidies because this is a big shift that I'm attempting. There's many of us trying to turn around, and these are real people. I mean, it's my neighbors who he grew up in the 80s. He went to college in the 80s. And he's one of the only people in his generation that actually went into farming. And what he was taught is to get big or get out. And so for his sense of success, he was just doing to be successful. And so now he owns thousands and thousands of acres, and he's just a cog rolling with that machine. It's so difficult for him to even imagine turning that ship around. So it has to be done sensitively so that, all of a sudden those subsidies don't come out underneath them and these farmers are left with a lot of anger and a lot of debt and everything else. I'm not a believer in subsidies, though. I'm not, even for our farm. Where I think the subsidies and the government could lend a hand is, like I just said, on the consumer end of helping support families to be able to purchase those fresh vegetables and organic and sustainable crops.
One of the things in terms of the 2008 Farm Bill was, when we were looking at provisions, was, as Gary was suggesting, was a shift, not overnight shift, but more money to small farmers that would then allow somebody like CSA to have a better position and grow, not large, but grow more, and there would be then more farmers at that level.
Since price is one of the main variables that organic farmers and a big business compete on, is there any realistic measure that can help close this gap, which will in turn increase competition between big business and small farmers, thereby promoting your produce?
Well, I mean, if we lived in a law of supply and demand and market, one of the things is that there would be, the more farmers that are doing this, number one, the better we would get of being able to do this, and we'd be able to do it more wisely, and the more energy that has gone into that goes into doing this, the more crops that we can grow and do it well, and so that would bring the price down.
I think that what we need to do is really come to terms with the reality of how much our food costs. And if we paid what it costs for our food, then we would not look in the same way as the difference between organic or locally grown costing more than what we can buy from conventional growers. And until we are willing to look at that honestly, and I mean long-term costs, it's not only the inputs, what we're doing to the environment, what we're doing to our health. Until we do that, I think we're still going to be focused on what is the cheapest.
Yeah, it would be nice if some of those factors would be put into the costs. Things like, it's us as the taxpayers that have to clean up the water supply. It's us as the taxpayers that have to, are dealing with nitrates in our aquifers in the rural area. All these things have its costs, and it's not gone on. It doesn't go on the backs of those farmers. It goes on it's another cost that's subsidized.
A question over here.
It seems like the method of growth so far for the last 20 years for this movement has been sort of one head of lettuce at a time, one consumer at a time. Is the farming community ready if big institutions jumped on board? If every college in America decided that their institutional food would now be organic, it's probably something like that, some institution would seem like a huge difference. But are you guys ready for that to happen?
He gets to hold the mic, by the way, because he's my boss.
As College of St. Benedict and St. John's University, and we have two separate food services, but both of them are committed to including more locally grown. And part of what is the reality is the local farmer needs to have a contract. And that contract then enables the farmer to say, I can produce this amount. And I think that is the key, is a guarantee that we or you or whoever is purchasing food will purchase that food. And then there's more investment, or there's more commitment to growing the lettuce or tomatoes.
The reality of this is that the answer to your question is no, not in any way, shape, or form, because of the fact that right now the average age of the farmer is getting close to 60 years old. There's not a lot of young people my age that are going into farming, and there sure is not enough people going into farming to provide as much of a quantity as to provide everyone here. And that, we can look at that as a challenge that we can, we need to work on. We need to start educating the next generation of farmers. We need to promote that. Being a farmer can no longer be what I grew up with, this Lake Wobegon Norwegian bachelor farmer image anymore. Farmers could be, they'd have television shows with the best chef and stuff like that. Why not the best farmer, out there? That kind of stuff, So, and that stuff is powerful stuff. That's why, Omnivore's Dilemma coming out is really powerful stuff to actually making some change. Isn't that right, Patrick? Right. He's one right here.
Gary, I'm a 1980 graduate of St. John's, psych major also, and I'm on a kind of good news, bad news side of the coin. I have some very highly valued land down close to Rogers that's a mile away from the major development. Land is selling for $110,000 an acre, and my farmer is one development check away from leaving. I'm unfortunately a commodity cash crop renter to my cousin who farms there, and I'm looking at going to a CSA operation. Can either of you talk a little about the economics behind getting started, and also, now I have my land already paid for, but looking to go from a rent situation to starting an operation. Can you cover some highlights of do's, don'ts? And I'm not a commodity, I'm not a person that's got $500,000 in invest, but where does one start if you want to convert from that to organic or just CSA?
I'll tell you the answer that I give everyone who comes knocking at my door saying I have a few acres of land and I want to do something with that. If you want to go into CSA, do not do what I've done. Do not do trial by fire. Intern. Take out a loan for the next year or two and intern at another person's farm for 2 years. Let them teach you what they've paid a high price to do, because getting into even a small CSA is very expensive, and the economics are very difficult. That is the reality. So there's no nice way to say that.
One over here.
We talked a little bit earlier about how it's difficult between rural and urban communities to have this communication of the importance of local food and small farms. I was wondering if you could touch on how we make sure that there's diversity in socioeconomic, cultural, ethnic backgrounds engaged not only in the consumer's end, but also in the producer's end.
One of the models that I think is working really well, most of you know that Detroit is a low income area of the United States, and if we look at Detroit, they don't have much access in the urban area to grocery stores, and they also have a very high incidence of obesity. So more fast foods than grocery stores. And one movement that is working is that the food that's coming from locally grown is coming into Detroit, so that the urban people don't go out to a farmer's market because they can't get there. They take 2 or 3 buses just to get to work, but they're bringing the food in. And I think that's a new model of taking care of some of those problems of access to good food.
It's a real. There's another one of our interns from Plowshare Farm, Grace. She's a Benny too. It's a real problem though in the rural area to draw in diversity. I mean, for me that's probably. I'm going to shed a few tears when I do this, but it's probably one of my most difficulties. Living where we do, because there's not a progressive community around us. There's not barely any young families around us. I keep on joking about the Lake Wobegon bachelor farmers. I can probably count, half a dozen Norwegian bachelor farmers on my hand. There's less than 3 families that are still on the land, and they're struggling. This past year, in particular, their dairy farmers, they've had it really rough this past year. So it's a hard issue because it's like, you know, out in the rural area, we have so much wealth in the state of Minnesota, so much wealth of the soil in the state of Minnesota. Yet all the people and all the activities are just in the city. So we need to draw people to the outreaches. We need to see the value in that.
Just a broader question to wrap it up. What is a developed country that's really getting this right? We can look to the model.
You hear nothing right now.
How about just getting it better?
I think we have a lot of the European countries that are trying to get it better. I think all developed countries are facing this problem of obesity, growing incidence of reliance on fast food. We probably can use the example of France or Italy, where eating is enjoyable. It is a social time that we eat together, we have conversation. The quantity of food is not the driving force of eating. It is the quality. You don't need large amounts. It tastes good. It's prepared with, for a better word, love. I mean, and it's a commitment to the eating process. I don't think we have that here, which is why we have emphasis on moving towards slow food as opposed to fast food. I think we need to change how we view eating. And that means we need to slow down. Can Americans do that? I mean, that's the question everybody always asks, is can we do it? I think we can, but I think we need to make that commitment, and it means that all of us in this room, we need to think about what do we do when we're eating? And probably what we're doing when we're eating is we're doing lots of other things, not necessarily conversations, not necessarily enjoying what we're eating. So we're not thinking about the taste, the flavors, the smells. We are eating to get the eating process done. That, I think, is the change we need to make.
Round of applause for our guest, Diane Hill-Jones. Diane Hill-Jones, Environmental Studies Professor, College of St. Benedict, St. John's University. Garrett Braver from Plowshare Farm in Parkers Prairie, Minnesota, and again named Edible Twin Cities 2009 Local Hero winner for Best Farm. That's a nice honor. I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. Thanks to all the folks here at Brother Willie's. Thanks to our sponsors as well, Best Buy for sponsoring their entire season of Policy in the Pint. And for the staff at the Current who makes this possible, Stephanie Curtis, Allie Mozoff, Jim McLean over there, Mark Weeds, who will be here all evening long as well, so stick around for that. Thanks to Sean Kershaw and Catherine Beltman at the Citizens League, our partners for Policy and a Pint. And we are so proud to have been doing this for 5 years with them. We hope that it'll be a long and fruitful project and conversation with them.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you very much.